Hello, I'm here today to talk about designing for a mobile mind, about great design for smartphone websites. So my name is Jenny Gove, and I'm a user experience researcher at Google. Before we get into our latest learnings about how to design great mobile websites, I want to tell you a story about a missed opportunity, a mobile experience I had just the other week. So sometimes I get the opportunity to go and work in New York. And I really enjoy this because I can take advantage of all the cultural opportunities there are there and see some shows or see some events. And when I was there last time, I decided to go and see this great little concert that I saw coming up. So in my hotel room on my laptop, I booked tickets. And it was kind of this venue which had small seats. It was nearly sold out, but I managed to get some tickets on a small table that had like about 3 seats left. The next day at work, I was talking to a colleague, and she was at a loose end for the weekend, for that evening. And so I suggested she come along. And so I pulled out my mobile phone, and I pulled up the site. And because I work on this stuff, I was pretty delighted to see from this kind of venue a really nice mobile optimized site. So I pursued that, and I found a couple of buttons. One was for the venue to choose the best seats, and one was for me to pick the seats myself, which in this instance is obviously what I wanted to do, since I wanted to choose seats next to mine. So I clicked that button, but nothing happened. There was a big white page, very disappointing. And as I was fumbling around the site, looking for what else I could do to buy tickets, I was looking for like a call button. Maybe I could call the venue. But meanwhile, my friend sort of said, you know, don't worry about it. I'll find something else to do. So this was, you know, such a shame because it was such a missed opportunity for this venue. I was about to purchase tickets and I couldn't. The venue had done really well. They'd done a lot of work on mobile optimizing their site, but they hadn't done well enough. And I wanted to spend my money, and I couldn't. So effectively, they were throwing money away. So why are we talking about this now at I/O 2014? Well, we know that there's amazing smartphone growth. We heard just yesterday in the keynote some incredible stats. Let's recap those stats that Sundar started his keynote with yesterday. So the industry shipped over 3 million devices last quarter, and they're on track to ship well over 1 billion phones each year. The number of 30-day actives for Android is over 1 billion. It's been doubling every year. And we have people checking their phone 100 billion times each day. So to put this in perspective over the last few years, the media have kind of made comparisons for us. One of those ones they made is, you know, there are more mobile devices and mobile device subscriptions than there are toothbrushes in the world. So these kind of stats put it in perspective for us. Mobile growth is phenomenal. This very recent graph shows a dramatic growth in mobile usage as a percentage of web usage. This is page views. Just from May last year to May this year, the growth is strong everywhere. And all this growth is great, right? Because using our devices is always such a great experience, right? Just like this, just like we see in the marketing. It's so easy. These people don't have a care in the world. They're happy, smiling people. They don't have any frustrations. They don't have any frustrations while they're trying to check out on their mobile. All the type is legible. Well, as a user experience researcher, I spend my time observing people's use of phones and mobile websites. And in the last few years, I've heard a lot of things like this. From previous studies, I've heard that mobile websites feel like they're cut down, they're harder to navigate, they're sparse in features, they're smaller, poor in design, and unfamiliar. So some of these things have been true in the past. Sometimes companies have not put all of their inventory on mobile, and people are confused because they know they can purchase these things from a company, or they know that they can get particular information from a company, and they just can't find it on mobile. People can be worried that they might miss something. They often have a sense of time urgency on mobile. So to give some more context, here's a participant quote from a shopping study that I ran, where one of our participants described shopping for a birthday gift on a mobile phone. And I'll quote her. She says, "I was worried I would miss something. I was worried about screwing something up. And you know her birthday was coming up quick." So I think this really nicely illustrates this quote. It illustrates that people are just trying to get stuff done when they turn to mobile sites. So we want to fix the poor experiences you've heard about. And the good news is we know it can be done because there are some examples of really great sites out there that are engaging users. So we at Google have been pretty vocal in the last few years about the importance of creating a great mobile site. But given those things we've heard users saying about mobile experiences, we think we need to do more to help you make those great mobile experiences. So we decided to put resources into creating materials and guidelines to help you. And there's compelling evidence we should do so if we look at some case studies. So the Huffington Post redesigned their mobile site, and that work led to great success for them. It resulted in 50% more time spent on their mobile device site, 37% more unique visitors, and they managed to reach 29% of all US mobile users. So in a different vertical, PlusNet's a telco in the UK. They redesigned all their sites through the creation of a responsive site, and they had a 10-fold increase in mobile conversions, and their time to convert decreased 40%. One more example here. This is cancer.org. It's the American Cancer Society. And they went mobile, and that resulted in 250% increase in mobile visits in 1 year, a 3 times increase in mobile revenue. That's donations in the case of cancer.org. And they saw higher rates of mobile access to key areas of their site. And I love the quote that came from the principal of digital platforms at cancer.org. She said she wanted to distribute cancer.org experience as widely as possible to as broad an audience as possible. And it was mission imperative to mobilize all the cancer.org content. And I think why this is so compelling to me is because, you know, this can go for kind of any company, really. If you don't cater for your mobile users on the web, then you're missing a bunch of your users. Mobile web can be a gateway to your business. So we're focusing on this now because mobile usage is growing so rapidly, and because mobile provides an increasingly important gateway to your business, and we want to help you to put you in a position where you can create a better experience for users. We want to develop a better ecosystem for the mobile web. And we want to tell you how the designs of sites that provide a really good experience differ from those that have user experience flaws. And we want to do this on the basis of data versus expert opinion, so that you can have the confidence in the information that we give you. So I decided to run a study. I wrote a research plan. And then we teamed up with Answer Lab, which is a user research company, and they helped us scale. And they helped us really make this happen. And we examined how a range of users interacted with a diverse group of websites. So I'm going to tell you briefly how we set up the study. We studied user interaction on 100 different mobile sites, and these range from really large retailers through service providers and information, sites that had information on them. We also included some lesser-known websites that have been growing in recent years to make sure we weren't only capturing what those big companies were doing. Participants brought in their own iOS or Android devices so that they were familiar with the phone. This study focused on smartphones. So there were 119 participants. And although those numbers don't seem big by Google scale, this is a usability study. So each participant came in for a separate hour. So that's 119 hours of study. And so really, it was a very large usability study. And participants worked through tasks for each of these sites. The method we used was traditional usability testing with Think Aloud protocol. So they spoke aloud as we had them go through different tasks on their sites. This provides us with insight into understanding the details of where there were problems with sites and where the experience is really kind of smooth and seamless. And they also provided ratings for the sites. The results of this large usability study were collated to form 25 mobile web design principles. And these key findings are intended to help you build better mobile sites and increase engagement and conversion for your business. So we've categorized these into 5 sections. These are mobile, homepage, and navigation, site search, commerce and conversions, optimizing form entry, and site-wide design considerations. So these principles are all about creating a better experience for users, enabling them to have a trouble-free experience on your site, whatever kind of site that is, informational, retail, e-commerce, or lead generation. So we're going to look at some examples from these 25 principles, and we're going to talk about the guidance based off the study results. So let's start with mobile homepage and site navigation. So the first and the foremost important thing to do for your business is figure out the primary purpose that your site exists. In our study, we tested interfaces similar to the one on the left and the one on the right. When users got to the one on the left, they had a particular task in mind, but the only call to action available to them was for them to learn more. It was kind of vague, and they really didn't have the confidence that they were going to be able to get to what they wanted to get to. In contrast, in the progressive site on the right, lead generation site, they'd made it really clear that users can get a quote, they can find a local agent, they can make a payment. One women's magazine site that we saw had buttons at the top, and they were labeled specials and looks. These were very vague, and participants really didn't know what they would get. So mobile users really want their information here and now, and figuring out what those key calls to action is the primary thing you need to do. Secondary content and calls to action can be accessed either further down the screen or behind menu icons. The next thing is to keep menus short and sweet. So we saw a number of extensive menus on mobile, and nobody's going to scroll through them. But we kind of analyzed the sites, and we saw that some sites had done a really good job of moving from desktop to mobile and reconsidering their menu structure for mobile. So Macy's does a great job of this if you take a look at their site. Consider how you can present the fewest menu items possible, but still keep those categories really distinct. You can do some user testing to help you with this. Do users understand the different menu items you're offering, and do they know what would lie beneath them? When mobile users navigate through your site, they want an easy way to get back to your home page. For example, perhaps they want to get back to do another search, or perhaps they want to start a new browse experience through your site. In the study, the users expected tapping the logo on the top of the page on the left to take them back to the home page, and they became really frustrated if it didn't work. So this is a really good example of the principle in action. 1-800-Flowers does this well here. So let's summarize the home page takeaways. Keep calls to action front and center. So even if you're developing a responsive site, you need to think about how that should be designed for mobile. Keep menus short and sweet. Make sure you're not having to scroll a great deal on mobile through your menus and that they're distinct. And make it easy to get back to the home page. Next, we'll look at the importance of mobile site search. So along with a homepage that focuses on calls to action, our study showed just how important it is to provide good, clear search functionality. So the design on the right here is great. You can see where you do your search immediately. There's a nice big search field. Now, it might sound surprising to you, like Google says search is important, wow. Well, I can tell you that in our team, we actually had quite a bit of discussion about this before we actually ran this study. The thought being that people often find it difficult, so we heard, to type on mobile. So maybe navigation is, the primary thing that we should be doing on mobile devices. But we found search to be really important. It's all to do with users having that sense of urgency and wanting to get to their content, it's sort of immediately. So we found that particularly on retail sites, search is hugely important, and on many other sites too. And often on other sites, when users couldn't find that key call to action, I think they're having a football match next door, they will turn to search next. Okay. So often it's tempting to put the site search behind an icon. We found that it was much more noticeable and visible to people when the site search was an actual field, and people found it more difficult to find search behind an icon. And I feel like, you know, if sites like Home Depot and Macy's can do this well, so can the rest of us probably. So to really scaffold users' tasks, the search needs to be smart, and signs of smart search include providing autocomplete in the search field, suggesting search terms and filters, correcting misspellings, and providing related matches in search results. So all of those things together in providing great search is about getting users to the relevant results as soon as possible. Now, the site search results need to be relevant, of course, and this goes for search results as well as autocomplete. So you can see some differences here. Too often we saw results such as those on the left. In that example, the word kids is surfacing lots of different things, but things that aren't particularly useful for people in a clothing store in terms of logically grouping the responses. On the right, Macy's do a good job here. They lead you to different categories of clothing, so kids' sweaters, kids' boots, kids' shoes, kids' jeans. On other occasions, in the search results themselves, we saw lots of irrelevant results, and people really don't have the patience to scroll through multiple pages of results. If the first few results aren't relevant, they might leave and go away, and then you've potentially lost that user. One way forward with this might be to consider using Google's custom search engine in your site. So filters go even further to helping users find the results they need. In some cases in our study, we found that even though companies had gone to the extent of making filters available, unfortunately, they weren't discoverable. So this is a mock-up, as you can see, on the left-hand side. But it's an example of an actual site we found where people were searching for clothing. And they had to scroll through about 6 pages of results in order to eventually find the filters to narrow the search. And they'd had thousands of search results. So this was really, really painful. And we found lots of people abandon this task in that case. Note that the user should never inadvertently be able to filter the results to a null set, of course, but we did see that in the study. As the users use controls, make sure that you can do things like provide them with the number of results that they're going to see. And that gives them an idea of, you know, is this kind of a result set that I want to see? If it's got 20 items or if it's got 2 items. Now, another way to assist users in narrowing the results to get to what they want is in what we call a guided approach. You can think of these as kind of like pre-filters or simple questions to provide more of a guarantee to your users that the search terms they eventually put in or the navigation they do here will lead to the results that they need. So in this example, imagine you're selling a limited set of products like shoes, bags, and accessories, say. After asking the user which of these they're interested in, you might up front ask, you know, whether they want women's shoes, men's shoes. You might also ask the size. And then the user knows they're going to get like perfectly sort of matched search results. And for you, you're making your user more satisfied. The thing that you're doing here is you're like pulling away a lot of your content so that it doesn't sort of infiltrate the things that they want to look for. I can give you a really nice example of this in one of the sites we studied. It was a site for providing care. It provides things like senior care, after-school care, pet care. Now, the last thing that somebody wants when they do a search for senior care is to find pet care in their search results. And so they had a guided approach like this, and it made sure that whatever search they did, you know, they weren't going to end up with after-school care in their senior care or pet care in their senior care. So a few questions up front for some businesses can really help ensure those users get more relevant results right off the bat. And it's particularly useful if there's 1 to 3 key attributes that you can ask up front to get them there. So let's look at the takeaways for site search. Make site search visible, that nice clear field at the top. Ensure that the results are relevant. Implement filters to narrow those results. And guide users to better search results if you're able to do that with your content. There are a number of ways that we've discovered the design of sites can help people towards conversion on mobile. People really want to convert on their own terms, very definitely. So we want sites to kind of work with people rather than work against people. And unfortunately, in the study, we saw quite a few examples of sites themselves being barriers to that engagement and to that use. So firstly, beware of making enemies at registration gates. Don't require custom account registration up front. And you'd be surprised at the amount of this we saw. We understand that getting access to customer information and preferences can be really integral to your business, but don't ask for it too early. Many of the sites that users rated the lowest were those where they were forced to create an account up front in order to continue. Users want to explore and browse content, perhaps get some of their tasks done before they commit to providing their personal information. And similarly, let users check out as a guest. If you're enabling people to purchase something, or perhaps they can send off for information, you want to aim for that option to enable users to check out as guests. This is because in our study, we found that participants really perceived the value of this. And it's because while they're doing the task, they're thinking of, like, I want to purchase this thing, or I want to get this information. I don't want to stop and have to think of an email password, or whether I want to connect my particular social network to this account and whether that's OK. So if you wait till afterwards, enable user to do their task, then you can also have another opportunity to ask them to register, and you can offer them tangible benefits as well, such as perhaps tracking their order. And remember, you don't want to negate the benefits of purchasing by having a process that isn't smooth here. All browsers allow the ability to auto-complete in forms, so make sure you don't turn that off. Users really like the benefit of auto-completing, so just let the browser do its job at that point. And there are other ways to help users convert users too. Oh, there you can see the checkout as guest. So picking up where you left off. Now, we've talked about this quite a lot at this conference already, and providing users with the opportunity to do this was really helpful. Within the study itself, we saw a number of users want to pick up on things later on. After all, in this particular situation, they were in a usability study. They often found things they wanted to see later. But this can happen in real life too, of course. Perhaps you want to look at something on a bigger screen. There's another goal. Perhaps you're distracted at this moment. You have to do something else, and you want to just pick up on this thing later. So we painfully observed several users copying and pasting the URL, which is really quite hard to do on mobile, then going and opening their email client, pasting it in. It was really quite painful. And then, of course, you have the issue that you might lose that user because they've kind of gone to do something else. So the best practices we saw here at this present time is to offer users opportunities within the site itself to pick up where they left off later on. So I've seen opportunities for people to pin things. I've seen opportunities for people to email within the site itself. You keep all that within the site, but they can email themselves. And obviously post things on various social networks. Often at the moment, this is used for sharing, but we saw a number of examples of people using this for themselves to pick up where they left off for themselves at a later point in time. And related to this, you need to create a consistent URL structure on your site so that when people do share URLs from their mobile on their desktop, they can use them. So on that note, our recommendation is to build a responsive site that enables that consistent URL structure rather than resorting to an m-dot site where there has to be redirects for users between sites. And if anyone saw Paul Lewis's talk today, we saw the hit that redirect causes in terms of time lag to load that mobile page. So let's review the commerce and conversion takeaways. So let users explore before they commit. You can always build that registration in at a later point. Let users purchase as a guest, and enable users to pick up where they left off. Optimizing form entry. Forms. Don't you love filling in forms on mobile? It can be really painful, I know. And, it's arguably the most painful thing that you can do on mobile. So let's look at a few of these things. Now, I should say before I start, we actually learned a lot of these things on desktop, but somehow when we moved to mobile, we forgot a lot of them. So these are just, often general good design principles, but they matter even more on mobile. Yep, that form on the left. Design a form that's efficient for the user to fill in, and not overwhelming like that one on the left. We saw more forms than we'd have liked to have seen in this study that looked like that. One thing we found was it's really good to chunk the form. Again, this is a principle that's taken from our experience with forms on the desktop. And it's helpful to make sure that those chunks in the form are kind of equal size and equal difficulty. So you can see this example here. There's, I think, 5 different steps to this form, and the user on the progressive site can easily see what they're going to have to fill in. So make sure your forms look more like the one on the right. Think about your site now, than the one on the left. Another useful way to streamline the conversion experience for users is to know and use what already exists in terms of information the user has already provided. We found that auto-filling whenever possible was of huge benefit to users. It's a bit sad to have to tell you this, but when this happened, when autocomplete and auto-filling worked, the users were surprised and delighted. Of course, it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it was, because they're so used to struggling through forms. So they would either struggle through the form, or they'd abandon their task and try and do it a different way. So it's just frustrating for users to have to put it in twice. We've all been there. It's kind of horrible. So for registered users, remember and pre-fill their preferences. For new users, offer third-party checkout and sign-in services. One specific example is to check that you don't require users to, for example, enter billing or shipping information that has already been entered, that already exists in their third-party checkout account. Now, every tap counts on mobile. For submitting information, users really noticed and appreciated websites that would automatically present number pads for entering zip codes, using the contextual keyboard in the right way, or automatically advance the number fields as they entered them. It can be really painful for users when that happens, so the experience that people are left with is a really poor one. And 2 forms can look very, very similar. We tested 2 pizza delivery forms, and they looked incredibly similar. But the number of taps it took on each form was very different, because one of them wasn't doing things like surfacing this contextual keyboard. So seek out any opportunities to eliminate any wasted taps in your forms. And here is some additional information and technical help that you can get on choosing the best input type, and this is part of the Web Fundamentals materials we've been talking a lot about at this conference. So good labeling is really important. If forms aren't labeled according to best practices, then again, users can get totally blocked and they can't proceed. So they can be labeled, of course, outside the field, and it's becoming more and more popular to label them inside the field, but just be careful how you do it and make sure that if users back out of that, then the label becomes visible again, because we had a user in our study who was entering their email address, and then they got distracted, and then they came back, and they went back, saw the word address, but didn't see that it was email address, and started entering their home address. So this labeling needs to be really clear. Now, working with dates. The recommendation here is to provide visual calendars where you can, because users often need more context when scheduling appointments and travel dates and things like that. Provide them with a calendar, because if they don't have one, they often aren't able to figure out what day of the week it is. That's often the primary information people need, I'm going to leave on a Friday. And so figuring out what the actual date is can be complex. And we saw users, again, come out of the task that they were doing and go to find their calendar app. Again, you've got the possibility that you could lose them. We found on travel sites that it was problematic when users had to choose an outward date and a return date within the same calendar. That seemed to be like an experience that was very difficult for them. It wasn't smooth, and so the best practice there is to provide 2 calendars, one for the outward date and one for the return date. Note also that there are system ways of dealing with dates, but on the mobile at this time, you don't get control of styling in the custom Chrome browser. Now, remember that I mentioned that completing mobile web forms was arguably the most difficult experience on mobile. Well, I may have been wrong, because what's more painful than that is having to do it all over again because you did it wrong the first time. Yeah, lots of nods. Okay. So there are standard best practices, of course, when it comes to helping users recover from and correct their errors. We need to provide clear error messaging, not cryptic error messaging, and we need to highlight the fields that need to be corrected. We need to make sure that, that the error message isn't just at the top of the screen and nothing is highlighting the field. But really the best way to address submission errors in web forms is to avoid them altogether. If we can combine those clear descriptions with real-time error validation, this was the most effective combination for enabling users to just go through that form once and get it done. And there were examples, but not very many, of sites out there that were doing real-time error validation, and it was by far and away the best experience. So let's summarize the takeaways about optimizing form entry. So designing efficient forms, chunking them like we saw, using pre-existing information, streamlining that information entry. Go and test your forms on your website. See how many taps it takes. See if you're using those contextual inputs. Minimize form errors with labeling. Provide visual calendars for dates. And real-time validation of the forms so that your users only have to go through them once. Now, there are a number of site-wide design principles that we uncovered during the course of doing this study on multiple users. And we're going to look at this now. So one of the main reasons that you make a mobile site is because it's really painful to do all that pinching and zooming when desktop sites appear on mobile. It's hard to pan and zoom around on mobile, especially in kind of like multi-dimensions. And it often leads to trouble with users viewing your images properly or viewing your text properly. Some really frustrating experiences that users had were when the home screen loaded fully zoomed in. They had no idea where they were. And when a user zooms in on a screen, you really lose control of your design, increasing the likelihood of discoverability issues. So make sure, even if you've kind of feel that you've mobile optimized or made your site mobile friendly, make sure there aren't any aspects of that site that require users to pan and zoom. Now, images on mobile, while we're talking about that, they can be very small, and people often want to see details when they're purchasing something, for example. So the best thing to do is make sure those images are tappable or expandable. On retail sites, customers really want to see the texture, they want to see the details. And participants got frustrated if they weren't able to see these. A good example of tappable, expandable images is provided by J.Crew on their site, so I suggest going and having a look at that. Now, location. We saw some examples of GPS location information being badly applied. So the example on the left is going to be problematic, and the reason is because the user doesn't really understand what you're going to be doing with that. They kind of need to see the context of how you're going to be using their GPS location. In our study, when users were asked to book a hotel room in Boston for a conference, that's a task we gave them, on a particularly popular hotel's website, they were prompted to share their GPS information immediately after tapping the Find and Book call to action on the home page. Accepting the request resulted in the location field automatically populating with the user's current city. But we saw that several users, automatically accepted this request. They didn't really think about it. And one user became particularly frustrated because they were trying to book this hotel in Boston, but it kept bringing up hotels in their home city. And we also saw UI issues. For example, where a site had a field that said current location, it looked to the user like they needed to tap that and they needed to interact with it. And then they felt that their current location would be populated. But it wasn't the case. On this particular site, if they left it alone, which is what the developer intended, this would result in their current location being detected. But the user just couldn't tell and got very frustrated. So a better experience is to make sure the user always understands why you're asking for location information. And then it's helpful to let the users choose to populate the location field at the appropriate place in the flow and through a clear call to action, something like find near me. Now this point about thinking about keeping users in the single browser window, we've already looked at that a little bit. We've looked about it in terms of like sharing information and also finding, picking up where you left off. But you need to think about all the reasons that users might leave your site, because it's not really what you want them to do. You want them to stay, you want to potentially have them convert on purchasing something or getting more information. Having the user switch between browser windows can be problematic because they do have this tendency to go off and look at other things. So think of all the ways, and one of those ways might be that they go and look for coupon codes. So we found some good examples of sites, this site here, and then I think we saw some pizza sites and other sites where they decided to provide coupons of their own to kind of stop users doing this and to keep them in their site. So try and do everything you can to ensure that your users stay in the browser window. Address those reasons consumers might leave. Now, many of the websites we tested and the companies we were looking at also had apps. And all of them promoted their apps in some way. Not surprisingly, participants weren't at all pleased with the situation that happens on the left-hand side. I think we've seen this all too often. This has been described as the door slam. The user came to your site to get some experience of your company or to do some task. And they didn't appreciate anything that kind of hindered them from doing that. In some cases, this was where there was perfectly adequate, very good mobile-optimized UI behind it, which users could actually use. And so in this situation, you're kind of like losing the opportunity to engage with users. So this full-page overlay or interstitial is not a good idea. It annoyed all but the most loyal and familiar customers. Many sites promoted their apps as a banner along the top or bottom, and users were fine with these banners if they were reasonably sized and dismissible. They weren't too happy, however, when the banners started taking up too much space and wouldn't go away. In landscape orientation, think about that too, because the banners can take up really valuable vertical screen space. So both Android and iOS users were used to seeing these banner promotions, and they were quite happy if they could dismiss them, or perhaps they would want to use them. But the thing I really want to emphasize here is, mobile web is an opportunity for you to engage your users. You might end up with a great pool of committed, engaged users on the mobile web. It's a gateway to your business, but you also might have a population of users there. So make sure that your promotions are not getting in the way of your key call to actions. And this is one of the most important principles. It's about taking all these design practices and creating a mobile-optimized site all the way through. Our study clearly illustrated how much users preferred mobile-optimized sites over desktop sites viewed on mobile. Many things. We saw lower user ratings for desktop sites on mobile, lower task success, much more errors, all the things you'd expect. However, we found that some sites mixed mobile-friendly pages with desktop sites. So you start off really, really well, and you're like, yeah, I can do this on this site. Hit a button, and there you go. The text is too small. It's a desktop page. Terrible experience. And we found that those actually rated the worst of everything. And it's because it really stops users in their tracks, right? They're trying to do their task, and it's even more of a disappointment in a way because it was more unexpected. So optimize your site for mobile, and you need to optimize the entire site. I know some of the sites can be really humongous efforts, and there can be thousands of pages to make mobile friendly. So in those cases, if you can only do it sort of in chunks, I really advise thinking about like the main navigation paths that people have to go through to make sure that you're not providing them with that experience of going from a mobile friendly site to page to a desktop page, you can look, of course, at your analytics traffic to try and work that out. So the site-wide takeaways are: don't make users pinch and zoom at all on your site. Provide expandable, tappable images. Be clear why you need a user's location for them so that that can be used wisely. Keep your user in a single browser window, so think about all those reasons that they might leave. Don't let promotions steal the show. And optimize your entire site for mobile. So that brings us to the end of the principles we're reviewing. And we hope these things that we've gone through are going to be helpful to you developing a better mobile web experience. And I know you're unlikely to have memorized this presentation. So the good news is that all these 25 principles are available in a white paper for you. And that white paper explains what you need to do. We also have Web Fundamentals, which is an online resource that tells you about how to do some of these things on the multi-device web. So if I've just covered the what to do, which is the white paper, you can think of Web Fundamentals as the how to do it. It covers a lot of the technical guidance, how to avoid the common pitfalls that people make when building sites, and it advocates for responsive design. And we have a number of performance tools. The primary one is the PageSpeed Insights tool, and it's available to you. It not only gives you insight into the speed of your site and how that loads and what you can do to improve that, but it also has some user experience feedback. Another easy way that you can help yourself make a better site is simply to have users go through it. This is actually in our usability lab, but you don't need any fancy equipment. You can just watch a few users, perhaps set some time to do that each week. See where the main problems are. And honestly, you just watch a few users and you'll come across those issues. You'll probably see some of the things we've talked about today. And everyone can use analytics, so trust that data and incorporate it with your user testing. And then you'll explore a pathway to getting more conversions on your site and improving the experience for users. So creating a mobile website is really imperative these days. And what I want to say is it's not just about shrinking desktop to mobile. Responsive design is a great underlying technology. You've got the one code base, which in the long term will make things easier. But you do have to think about how those elements of your site are going to surface and what's important at the different device sizes, the different contexts that users are using those in. So I want to conclude with, now is the time to really make improvements to your mobile site. Think about all the resources and the effort that's being put into creating desktop sites. And think about applying that same resource and effort and putting that into your mobile site. So to get going on mobile sites, we have the principles, we have Web Fundamentals, and we're going to develop a better experience with more conversions so that you can have happier, more engaged users. So thank you for your time. And I'd be grateful for hearing from you. So feedback on the presentation will be great. Please check out the principles. And I'm going to be around for discussion and Q&A after this talk. Thank you.